Welcome to the Shaman Stories podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today with me we have a returning guest, Nikola. Now, plot twist, Nikola is going to be interviewing me. I figured now is time to do my own story, and instead of me just standing there staring at the camera or talking into the microphone by myself for an hour, it might be more entertaining to have my first guest come back on and interview me. So, with that, Nicola, I pass this over to you, and it's your show.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Hello to you. Very beautiful to see you again. And thank you for inviting me for this interview of your timeline. Well, let's just dig into it, so to say. So, Jeremy, I'm thinking starting at the roots. What was your childhood like? And were there any moments in your early life that hinted at the deeper spiritual awareness?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I've thought about that for the past few years, especially diving more deeper into this my own work today. And I looking back, I could say there were some things there. So I mean, going back, my childhood was pretty basic. It was pretty I would consider it normal. We didn't go to church. My mom was raised Catholic Baptist down in deep South Georgia, but she never really enforced religion in the house. My dad wasn't spiritual at all. I would go to church with friends to kind of check it out and see what it's about, but it never really stuck with me. I always found it interesting, but not something I wanted to do on a regular basis. And we always moved too. So every couple of years we were renting houses. And so we would always move to a different neighborhood, different school. And I would just kind of start over, meeting new people, learning the neighborhood, just starting over every couple of years. Because my parents' end goal was to eventually get stationed overseas. They were both ex-military, working for the government, DoD civilians, and so their goal was to always get stationed overseas somewhere. So they never wanted to settle down and buy a house. And so with that, I mean, I never really had roots anywhere. Um, as far as like the spiritual side of things, I was always curious. Like I said, I read the Bible, I read the Quran, I read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, those kind of things, because I was curious about what else was out there. I felt there was something else out there. I didn't know what, but I didn't believe that any one religion would take me there. And so I didn't, as a child, you don't really know more than that. But I wasn't seeing ghosts. I wasn't playing with spirits. Looking back, I think I did have the call to shamanism even at an early age because I would sit there in school and I would just start drumming on my desk, but it was that steady beat, and I would just do that steady beat over and over and just, like, space out. I don't remember if anything actually happened from that, but I would just do that beat to the point where the teacher would tell me to stop type of thing. So with that, probably there was the connection there, that pull that I just didn't realize what it was. And I was always interested in movies that dealt with, like, indigenous people, Native Americans. Yeah, I would see the medicine man on TV. I would read a lot of fantasy books about healers just walking in and pulling in energy and making cool things happen. But yeah, I never thought it would be something I would do.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Well, I see lots of similarities to my life story as a young man, and one thing that falls on my mind to reflect, well, how your young mind was actually challenged by changing these environments as your parents were working for the government, and never being able to kind of to receive a firm circle of friends, but just changing after an adaptation. So this made your mind, from my point of view, more neuroplastic, more aligned, for learning, for adaptation. So from my point of view, that's very great. Thank you for sharing, Jeremy, your experiences from the childhood. My next question for you, as I know that you're working much with relieving pain and trauma for PTSD struck people. And I know that you're cured of PTSD as well. And my question is now, how did your experience in the military shape your sense of self?
Hmm. It's an interesting one. I'm trying to think of how that worked because in the military, I joined the military later. So I didn't join the military till I was 25. So at that time, I was already in positions of leadership. Before I even joined the military, I was actually an assistant manager at a restaurant. So I was in charge of the kitchen. I was in charge of making the schedule. I was in charge of ordering all that stuff. Before that, I was an assistant manager at a bowling alley. I've always been in those positions. And then when I joined the military, I came in at an E2. Within a year later, I was an E4. And then I was made an E5, which is a sergeant for those who don't know. And so I had a squad. I was already in charge of people, taking care of them. And so that was never an issue with the military. Like, I actually enjoyed the military for the most part. It's just once you start having kids and a family, it really wasn't for people with family from my point of view, because you're at the time we're deploying all the time, we're going to training all the time. And so towards the end of that, I was just done and I wanted to get out. I was injured, I was done, I was angry. I just wanted to get out of things. And so I'm trying to go back to that question of defining of myself. I don't think my definition of myself truly changed because of that. My When I got out of the military and started dealing with my PTSD, then my definition kind of changed because I was trying to figure out who I was again. Because it was, again, I was in positions of leadership before the military, during the military. Then when I got out, it was kind of trying to refine myself again, refine that person that I used to be. Because it wasn't really till about my last 2 years in the military that I started having to deal with PTSD, but I didn't know what it was at the time. I didn't understand what was really going on. I was just angry all the time and didn't understand it. And so then it was getting a job at the state. I was just stuck in a cubicle, confined. I didn't really have any people to talk to, didn't have any people to work with because I was in like a solo siloed position. And so once I got through that and started building a new community and finding myself again, then I think my definition of myself kind of shifted back to the way it used to be. So there was that period of a couple years where it's like I didn't have a self. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think that's the better answer I'm trying to get to. Was when I started the military, I knew who I was. When I was starting to get out of the military, I was just lost and confused and didn't know. I didn't know if I was going to find a job. I didn't know where we were going to, if we were going to stay in this state. I had just had a child. Like everything was just crazy and up in the air for about 2 years before I got out to about 5 to 6 years after getting out of the military. And that's when I started truly finding my community. And then I started working on myself. Hopefully that
Thank you.
kind of answers that.
Well, yeah, it does. I see lots of leadership and management abilities uh, with you, because actually I think that your childhood experiences and neuroplastic experiences shaped you in a way so that you had effortless youth age and you were adaptable for everything that you encountered in your life. But I see as a veteran of my own, trauma and PTSD shows up first a little bit later. So that's normal. Thank you, Jeremy. Next question. Can you describe a moment where everything changed for you, where this trauma imprinted itself?
So when the moment when the trauma actually came onto me.
Yeah, imprinted.
See, that's a hard one because for me, looking back at it, I think it was compounded and it was building and building. So it wasn't like one main event that happened to me. So like my first deployment was to Iraq, I want to say 2007, 2008. We're up near Mosul. And I was an IT guy, so my job was to basically set up the communications within all the trucks. My unit was a transportation unit, so their job was convoy security. So they would have like 10 line haul trucks, the kind that you see going to Walmart, things like that. And then in between each truck, they had gun trucks. So that would be the unit. They would have a Humvee, usually a 50 cal, and they would be driving and protecting this convoy. And so I was in charge of making sure the IED jammers were working, the radios were working, the GPS was working, we had like it was called a Blue Force tracker, but it was basically this device where we could text and chat with each other and had like a GPS map overlay, making sure all that stuff worked and that they can communicate with the base, the people back home, the unit, and each other and other units. But every now and then I would have to fill in and go on a mission. And so I remember one of the first times was I was an E2, fresh into the unit, fresh first time ever deploying, just started. And they're like, "Oh, we need you to go out the wire and go on mission. You're going to be a gunner." I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" I was like, "Oh, you're going to get in this Humvee and you're going to man the 50 cal, and if something happens, you got to take care of it." Never touched a 50 cal before, didn't know anything about it. I think we might have used it once in training, but it wasn't something that I heavily trained on. And so they literally had to show me how to mount it, hook it up, feed in the ammo and everything. And I'm just sitting there going, "Okay, I guess this is what we're doing today." And so we go out on mission and we go through up through Mosul. And at that time we were taking the convoys up to the border. It was like the green zone near Turkey. But you had to first go through Mosul and the rest of northern Iraq and everything first. And there's this part in Mosul where you're going and you're driving through and there's these huge cliffs above you and you're just kind of scanning the area because you don't know if there's a sniper, you don't know what's going on. And then you get through Mosul and I don't know if you've ever been to the Middle East, but a lot of times in the Middle East there's these big buildings, but they don't finish the top couple floors. They're just kind of skeletons of themselves. They have the main post and the floor, but there's no walls. And so you're always scanning those through the city because you never know. And I think one of the first things that happened was the convoy in front of us, we got stopped and they had a firefight with one of those types of buildings because there's people up in that building. And I remember this helicopter just kind of flying in from nowhere. And then it just kind of hovers in front of the building and then starts lighting it up. But
Mm.
this was probably a good half a mile ahead of me, but you could see it in the middle of the night. And they just took out the guys at the top of the building, and then everybody started moving again. It was little things like that that happened that wasn't directly to me, but it was stuff that I had to experience. Or another time, we're in a convoy near Baghdad. Same thing. We're just driving through, and they had route cleaners, route sweepers in front of us, and they're kind of like these mini tanks without getting into the specifics of it. And they're ahead of us, and one gets taken up by an IED. And he just kinda rolls backwards and they stop and we're like, "Okay, are they okay? Is everything good?" They're right in front of us. We're trying to wait. We're also manning security just in case they need us. And then, we're scanning with our night vision goggles looking for things, and then all of a sudden this other, like, mini tank hauls ass down the other road and starts lighting up the forest because they found where the guys were, and then luckily the people on the first tank, they just had, like, a concussion and they were able to get up and start fighting and cleared everything. But again, I wasn't shot at specifically. I didn't have to shoot anybody, but that stuff gets your adrenaline going, gets you pumping, kicks on that fight or flight, and you don't not realizing it at the time. So it was compounded. And that was the first deployment. When I came back from the first deployment, I was fine. as far as I knew. Wasn't angry, everything was fine, I was okay with loud noises, but then the 2nd deployment happens, and the 3rd deployment happens. By the 3rd deployment, I was getting out and I was done. I didn't like loud noises, I didn't like fireworks. Friends of ours would invite us over for New Year's fireworks or 4th of July. I couldn't go. I couldn't deal with it. Now I can go out there all the time and shoot off Roman candles with the kids and have a blast. But it took many, many years to get through that.
Well, thank you, man. I can really relate to your experience. It's very intense, you know. And I was working similar by the United Nations with humanitarian convoys. So we couldn't return the fire when we were under attack, but we were often also in similar situations. And part of our mission back there was, you know, we had protection from the weaponized forces of the United Nations, but they never had a mandate to shoot back unless somebody shot back at them only. So they were kind of figurating as our protection. I feel you fully. These war situations can be very tense, you know, and they kind of make an imprint on our psyche very deeply. Thank you, Jeremy, for sharing.
Even doing like the peacekeeping stuff, sometimes we'd have to go outside the wire. We might be looking for a driver, doing paperwork, that kind of thing, and just checking out, but you never know who was around you that might want to do something to you. So you're always on guard. And we'd go out base and like the little kids would run around and try to ask us for presents and they'd want candy or they want drinks. Sometimes they would try to steal the pins off my uniform. And it's
Oh,
like
man.
they're just kids, but at the same time, you don't know, like you hear all the stories and it's like, well, maybe some adults wired them up and they're gonna do something to us. It's like you're always on edge because you just don't know. Like they would put IEDs and everything, animal bodies on the side of the road, up on poles where you can't see them pointing down at the windows of the vehicles.
Mhm.
Like, you just never knew, and so everybody would be on edge. Like, it was rough.
Sure, man. I feel you. Listen, my next question is then we will stay a little bit more in this PTSD corner. So, next question is what role did pain and PTSD play in cracking you open to a different kind of healing?
Yeah, I would say it it built up and it built up. At one point, like I said, I came back from my first deployment or my last deployment, excuse me, before I got out. My son at the time was 15 months. So I lost a whole year of his life. Like, I left when he was 3 months. I came back on his birthday for R&R, and then I came back at the end, he was about 15, 16 months. So I lost that whole year. I didn't have that connection with him. I didn't know how to connect to him, and that also made me angry. And it still wasn't quite enough. At one point, I remember getting so angry that I just wanted to, like, hit something, and so I went to the VA and was like, "Look, something's wrong. I need help." And they're like, "Well, are you gonna kill yourself?" I was like, "I'm not planning on it, but I feel like I'm gonna punch everybody else, like, I'm angry and I don't know what to do." And it was literally just, "Well, here's some pills, take one, and if you need to talk to somebody, there's a Tuesdays at 1:30." I'm like, "Well, I'm working now. I can't just leave work. Like, is there something in the afternoon? Is there something on the weekend?" And at the time, there wasn't. That was just what they had in the area. So I was like, "Well, I can't. I just started a new job. I don't have much leave saved up. I can't just take off and lose a half a day because, I just started the job." Even going to the VA at that time for 1 hour appointment slot took half the day. So you might as well just take the whole day off because you're waiting around all day. I really got just fed up with the VA as a whole because it just wasn't doing anything for me. But I went and I got the medication and it just numbed me. Like I just didn't care about anything. And I didn't like myself. I didn't want to do anything. I wasn't happy. And so finally I just stopped the medication, started self-medicating with weed, marijuana. And I wouldn't smoke it all day, but my the psychologist that I talked to when I was doing my clearing and getting my disability and everything that I had, he had said, "Officially, I can't tell you this, but if you smoke just a little bit of marijuana each day, it'll help rewire your brain again, like reconnect the synapses in your brain, and it's been proven to show people to kinda go back to how they used to be before they had the trauma." And here in Washington State, it wasn't fully legal yet. You had to get a license for it, and then you could go do it. So, I went, brought my big ass packet of medical history from the VA, and put it on the counter, and was like, "All right, I want a license." They went through everything. They're like, "All right, yep, you check all the boxes. Here's your license." And then you could go to the dispensary and actually buy it.
Mm,
And that worked for quite a few years, but then I wasn't happy with myself because I would go to work, take care of things, be done at night, put the kids down to bed, and then I'd smoke a little bit, but then I would just sit up on the couch being couch locked, eating food all night. Now I'm
mm,
getting out of shape. I'm not happy with the way I look, and I'm just feeling like crap the next day because I'm eating those inflammatory foods. So, like my shoulder and my back that was all messed up from the military was hurting even worse because I'm just eating foods that, you know, aggravate it. And I didn't realize that at the time. So to go to your point, it another 10 years of compounding of me before I wanted to work on it, probably 8 to 10 years. And then at one point, I just started getting more and more angry all the time, blowing up at every little thing. I remember one time my wife and I were having a fight over something stupid. Like it wasn't anything important. It wasn't anything big. I just felt like she wasn't listening to me or she didn't understand or some again, it was really stupid. I just wanted to hit her at that moment so hard, but I didn't wanna hit her, you know what I mean? I didn't wanna be that guy because that would change everything. So I just kinda walked away and punched a hole in the wall. That's not much better, but I had to get it out somewhere, so I punched a hole in the wall and I just walked away and calmed down, and at that moment, that's when I knew I needed to do something different, and I needed to change something. It got to the point where I didn't wanna be the guy that hits his wife and kids because he's so angry and didn't know what was going on. I didn't wanna be that guy. I didn't wanna be another statistic of a veteran that lost his shit because he didn't take care of himself. But I still wasn't so that was the start of it. That's when the pain got so bad that I needed to do something. I wasn't doing talk therapy or anything of that yet, but I changed it and I started learning how to box. So getting that now I look at it, it was that somatic body release is what I needed at the time. I still hadn't worked on the mental or the spirit yet, but I was clearing it out of the body. And so I got like a home boxing kit and there's like an online program where you can watch and does like little trackers to track your punches and everything. And so I started teaching myself how to box and I got a lot of that aggression that way.
mm. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing, Jeremy. I relate very well to that as well because my timeline was very similar, just packed up in another way, similar points. And thank you for sharing this breaking point of your awakening from your state. When the thought appeared that you had this desire to be aggressive towards your family. Thank you for being so truthful and vulnerable to sharing this with us. So my next question to you is, who or what first introduced you to the path of the spiritual education and inner work?
That's an interesting one. I had always been interested and so I would listen to podcasts about magic, conspiracies, stuff like that. And I always found it interesting that people were doing, different things like chaos magic or working with spirit guides and doing altar work and stuff like that, but I would never do it. Um, and even my wife, she was always interested in that stuff, but she never really committed to it either. Here where I live now and when I got out of the military, We stayed where I was, and it's this small town in Washington near JBLM. The interesting about this town is a lot of people will say there's a cult here, and I kind of leave that one open to interpretation. But there's a lady here named Jay-Z Knight. She channels a guy named Ramtha, who was apparently down in Egypt a couple 100,000 years ago or something, and
Oh,
he's been preaching a lot of the same stuff that people are just now catching up with quantum physics, stuff that, like, a lot of us shamans know, but he does it in a way where it's more scientific base, talking about the quantum field and, instead of Kundalini energy, it's moving energy up through the different frequencies of the chakras and stuff like that. So I ended up in this place. Now I don't follow Ramtha. I've never been to any of the events. I've seen some of the videos. Now looking back as, going through my own shamanic training, and a lot of the stuff's like, "Oh, yeah, okay, I see where they're coming from," but I don't resonate fully with the scientific approach of it, so it never really worked for me, but I say this to say that this is a community where I'm at where people are more open to spirituality and stuff like that than any other place I've been to so far. Now, maybe obviously Sedona, things like that would be way more, but I've never been there. And so I kept running into people who follow Ramtha and understand his teachings and talk about it on the side. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I heard that on this podcast and this and this and this. But I still don't get into the way he teaches or she teaches, whatever you want to say. It wasn't until, again, I started Landmark first. My wife took Landmark, I want to say 2016, 17. She went through a weekend and she's like, "You need to do this. This will help you. Sign up for it, please. I would like you to try it." And I was hesitant to do it, but I was like, "You know what? I'll try anything at this point." Because this was around the same time of my breaking point. I was like, "I'll try it. Let's do it." And going through Landmark, it wasn't spiritual, but it taught me about my stories. That's the whole thing about the first weekend is it teaches you about your stories, your three main points in your life that you create stories around at those moments which define the rest of your life. It's how you react to them. And we know it from the shamanic realm too. It's like the imprints that get into your energetic field. Something happens to you. And now that becomes your story based upon the imprint that you have. So that was kind of the start of my process. And then I started clearing some things from the mental level. So again, I was doing the somatic release with boxing and starting to work out again, getting back in shape, trying to watch what I was eating. My pain was going away, things were getting better. Now I went to Landmark and I started working on the mental side of things, my stories, what was going on in my head. It still didn't address the root core of my PTSD, but it was helping. It was allowing me to understand things better. And then during that process, I started trying some of that chaos magic stuff, trying sigil making, trying small altar work, trying to reach out to things of the unseen because I didn't fully understand it yet. But I knew there was something more out there. I've always felt like I was being guided to a point. Like there's many points in my childhood where things just happen where I knew there was something bigger. Like I was in Egypt for the millennium. Like I was at the pyramids from the New Year's Eve of 99 to 2000.
wow.
And I had actually told my dad apparently when I was 10, we were watching the news and they were talking about, "Oh, here's all the places people are gonna go on the millennium, and here's all the different things that you can do." And they showed the pyramids, and I looked at my dad and said, "That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be at the pyramids." I don't remember saying this, but through a chain of events, I ended up living in Germany, just happened to know a guy at the hotel I was working at who was a scuba diver instructor at the hotel who also owned a scuba diving shop on the Red Sea and always flies back during the winter. And was like, "Hey, if you want to come hang out for a couple months, feel free to come over." And so me and my friend brought open-ended tickets and we left Germany, went to Egypt for a couple months to be at the pyramids because at the time everybody thought Pink Floyd was going to be playing there. We're just like, "Oh, this would be awesome. We'll see Pink Floyd at the pyramids." But we didn't he wasn't there, but it was still a great time, but stuff like that would always happen, camping out in the desert with the bedouins, staring at the stars that are literally touching the ground, like, there's something more out there than just us. And so stuff like that slowly started opening me up to these things too.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Beautiful story as well, how a young you could see with parts of you attracting this future which came as a 20-year-old. Beautiful, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing that. So my next question is, did you discover any extraordinary abilities or gifts during your healing process?
Yeah, I think one thing I do better than others is probably extractions. So extractions would be clearing entities from a person's body, their field, clearing it from their house, those kind of things. I've been getting a lot better at sensing them too. I mean, even just recently, last week actually, I had a client reach out to me. It was a young couple. They were wanting to get married, but the guy's ex-girlfriend had died of a accidental drug overdose in the house. And so they felt like she was always still there, lingering around. And I did my scanning and I checked, and she was there. She was stuck. She just needed to move on. Nothing malicious. She wasn't causing any problems. And so I just went to their house and did the death rites for her. And so I just set everything up, called in the directions, brought her back, found her in the stone world, brought her back to the low world to get some healing, and then just did the death rites and just moved her on so she can go to the ancestral plane. And even during the our training, because you and I both went to the same training together, the illumination part was great. I was like, okay, this is fun. But when we got to like the extraction part, I'm like, oh, there's something here. I like this. Like, what is this? I want to learn more about this. And it was just something I was good at. I remember one time I had a client on the table. I'll say client, it was a friend, and she was helping me when we're training and we have to write our case studies and stuff like that. And I'm doing an illumination on her. Then suddenly I wasn't really good at reading energy at the time, but I suddenly felt like this shift move, like something was trying to get away from me. And I didn't know what it was at first. And then my friend was like, I think there's something that's moving towards my feet. I'm like, okay, felt that too. We're gonna deal with that in a second, type of thing. And I was like, all right, let's get in there. And then, I finished the elimination, cleared her out, got rid of the attachment that was there. And I find, I'd say 8 out of 10 times working with people, we all have something attached to us because we haven't worked on clearing ourselves and getting rid of things. And that's one thing I found out with my own healing was I had a fire elemental attached to me. So that was also increasing my anger, making me more angry than I used to be. It's something I picked up in Afghanistan, but didn't realize it. And so extractions, I think, is something I'm good at. And that's just, I've also done more training on it outside of our own initial Four Winds training. I worked with Obi, who we both know. He's a South African shaman. It was like I kept asking where I should go to learn more, and then his name kept coming up. So I reached out to him, started training with him as well. But yeah, I'd say extractions work is something that pops up a lot. And
Thank you for sharing. How about, do you experience sometimes heightened intuition? Do you receive visions, energy perception?
yes, usually only yes. So I would, and that's something. Look, another thing I would probably say, looking back in my past, there's been times where things have popped up and I just didn't realize what was going on. So one thing I really remember, I was probably 11 or 12, and I'm at a crosswalk where my friend and I are trying to cross the street. The light's green for us to go, and we're running across the road, and it's like a 4-lane highway. It's pretty busy, but it's in like a suburb area. And I'm running, and then all of a sudden something said stop. And I literally stopped where I was, and this car ran a red light. It went right in front of my face. So it's like stuff like that would happen that I just was like, "Oh, okay, whatever." I'm 11, 12. I didn't think about it. Another time was right before COVID happened, the summer of 2019, probably April-ish, actually. All of a sudden, I just had this weird instinct. I was like, "We need to move. We need to move now. We need a place with bigger land. We need somewhere that's more isolated. We need to move." And my wife didn't understand it. I was very adamant. I'm like, "We need to move." My friend was a real estate agent. I'm like, "We need to look at some places. Let's figure something out." I was just so adamant about moving that it was almost like I was crazy. But something was telling me we needed to move and we needed to move now. And then we found our place. We have like 8 acres now. There's like 50 acres of forest across the street from us. And there's only 4 people off my little driveway and we're left alone. And then COVID happened where we had to stay home and everybody in the cities were going nuts and people were having fights and all sorts of stuff. It was like, oh, okay. Maybe that's why I needed to stay. Working with clients, I've gotten better at that, but usually only when we're in a session. Sometimes I'll intuitively know that they're not telling me everything I need to know, try to dig down a little bit deeper, that kind of thing. Sometimes I might see something off to the side, and I'm like, oh, something's trying to come in or something's trying to do something. When I'm with the client and we're in a session and I'm doing illumination, sometimes their spirit guides or ancestors will show up and I'll just be like, "Oh, do you know a person who looks like this or this?" And they're like, "Oh, that sounds like my uncle or that's my aunt or that was my grandmother." I'm like, "Okay, well, they're here now." And then sometimes they're leading the session. I've had some spirit guides who are like, "No, stop what you're doing. Focus over here." Oh, okay. And I'll just do what they tell me to do because they're here for a reason. But I don't see spirits on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes I'll get a sense of something, but over time, I'm getting more and more open to it, but it didn't start out that way.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Well, from my point of view, these are both mystical and transcendental experience that you've been experiencing both as a young man at the time that you couldn't realize that these were some higher energies, even your spiritual guides, protectors, whatever it was, something was going on with your spiritual early awakening and later on. Thank you for sharing, man. Beautiful, beautiful experiences to be sharing with me and with us, with the rest of the viewers. So my next question to you, in what way has your identity transformed since healing the PTSD?
Hmm. I mean, I will say there's always moments where things come back up, but it's obviously 99% better than what it always was. I never think you fully heal trauma 100% where it's always completely gone. It's the same thing with grief. We lose our loved ones. We've learned to work through the grief and move past, but there'll always be moments where you might get triggered again. Maybe it's a song or, you open up an old email type of thing and you remember everything. So I never want to say that I'm 100% clear of my PTSD or my trauma. I don't think you can be, but I think you can be 99% move past it. As far as my identity from that, obviously I've become more spiritual, more open to that, more open to even talking about it. It took a long time, even when I started doing the shamanic course of like actually telling people I was doing this stuff because I still felt like the crazy guy. It's like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain this to people. But I think becoming more open about it, becoming more spiritual about it, I now go to like local business groups where I'm like, yeah, I'm a shamanic healer. If you're ever interested, talk to me. And then things like that. That's kind of how the house clearing came up was I went to a local business group and 90% of them were all real estate agents. And I'm like, well, I can't sell you a house, but I'll clear a house for your client type of thing. But yeah, just becoming more. integrated with that part of myself and not being afraid of it or even embarrassed by it. I don't think I was ever afraid of it. It was more just embarrassed because it's not quote unquote normal, you know. You say you're a shaman, people are like, "Oh, well, you can't use that word." Well, that's what they told me to use. The Quero people who actually trained me down in Peru say just to use that word because that's what everybody calls it, and that's the easiest way to say it. If I go around saying I'm a curandero, no one's gonna understand what that means, and I'm just gonna have
Yeah.
to say I'm a shaman.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
you can't be worried about that. If the people training you are from that indigenous tribe that tell you to use a certain word, that's the word I'm gonna use. Like, energy healer, shaman, whatever, I don't care anymore. I don't wanna put labels on it. But as far as my identity with that, yeah, it's just becoming more open to the idea of those kind of things, being more spiritual about it. You know, we have an ancestral altar now. I've done plant medicine ceremonies where I've worked with my ancestors in different ways. Even when my own father passed away a couple years ago, just knowing that there's something more out there, that he's not just gone, that I can communicate with him whenever I need to. And honestly, having the privilege of being able to do the death rites on him at that moment when it happened, for me, that was an honor in itself because I was able to help him move on. And I've communed with him ever since, from either on the ancestral altar or plant medicine ceremonies. And I guess that goes back to the other question you mentioned. Sometimes I'm just driving in the truck and I'm like, I look over and my dad's there. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Or one of my other guides are there. And it's like, I know I'm on the right track or I know something's going on. Or if I'm having a bad day, I can feel my guides or my dad. I include him now in the guides. He's there. And for a man who was never spiritual, I consider him a light worker because when he passed away, people from all over the world that have met him were reaching out, wanting to do something for my mom, wanting to help out. Like all these people that he touched and helped in some different aspect. Like he was always there for people. And so he didn't heal them per se with energy or anything, but he healed them other ways.
Beautiful story. Thank you for sharing. Uh, this is very beautiful, and I relate very much to you mentioning that. Well, okay, we can't clearly cure the PTSD fully, but these parts of us old self remains in one or another way. It's all about staying conscious and what can we consciously release? Can we work on these parts? Thank you for sharing such beautiful story. Um, so far. And my next question is, what practices or rituals or tools are now essential in your daily spiritual hygiene?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing I try to always do as much as possible daily, and I'm not perfect at it. There's days where I'm just like, I don't want to do this. But opening up sacred space, lighting some incense for my lineage and the ancestors. Those are kind of my normal go-to of basic. This is what I'm doing. Um, Cleaning the altar, those kind of things. If it's a special occasion like a birthday or a major holiday, I might put some food out for the ancestor of my choosing at the time. So if it's my dad's birthday, my wife's dad's birthday, we'll put out like a small thing of food for them. Journey work when I remember to do it, those are important. Sometimes I'll just do different rituals depending on what's going on. So at the beginning of the year, I like to do what's called the headless rite, where I'm just opening up anything that's possible for my own good to, and, clearing the things out of my way that don't need to be there and just putting myself in the position of just allowing things to happen. That's been a really good, powerful one that I do every year and just letting things take its course. Trying not to focus too much on the outcome, but just letting it get there. Those are the main things I do daily. If I have a client or something specific, I might sit down, maybe I'll do like oracle cards or tarot cards and just try to get like a sense of how the session's gonna go. I'm trying to play more with tarot cards for people because they seem to enjoy the messages that come out of it, and they're usually it's pretty spot on for what they need at the time. But yeah, those are probably my main ones that I do. I try not to get too bogged down with 20 different rituals and practices. I've done things where for like 90 days you do a mantra of 100 every day, twice a day, and this and that, and that just kind of takes away the I guess the fun of it. You know what I mean? Because then you're just like, I don't want to do it, but I have to do it because this is what we have to do. This is what I'm told to do. It's I think over time, just making sure that connection is there and reaching out to your guides on a daily practice, even if it's just to say hi. I forget who said it best was you don't want to always go to your guides when you need something. That's like going to your neighbor constantly borrowing sugar or getting a cup of milk, but you never say hi or give anything back. So it's building that relationship with them and just saying, "Hey, how's it going? Here's a little incense, here's a candle, hope all is well." And even if you don't offer anything, it's just letting them know that you know that they're there and that everything's cool. And so that way, when I do need to ask for something, whether it's helping with a client or helping with something I need, they're more in tuned and more likely to participate.
Beautiful, man. Practicing reciprocity across the realms, across the physical to spiritual realms. I like that. Really, I like this is a good example for lots of us to be practicing, implementing into our daily lives. Thank you for sharing, man. Beautiful. So, my one of my last questions here today for you is: what future vision are you holding now for your life, your mission, and the world?
The main thing I'm working on right now is I built a PTSD trauma program. And so that's actually kicking off in April. But my goal is to get it to the point where it's repeatable and we can get more and more veterans or first responders or people who went through some sort of trauma or PTSD and just make it a continuous thing and get the information out there more. And shamanism alone wasn't enough to fully help me. It helped a lot. But again, it was that I I call it the 3 tiers, the mind, body, and spirit. You have to address each one of these levels in order to fully heal yourself when it comes to trauma or PTSD. So even in my program, I got a guy who named Jeff. He lives up in Seattle. He works with the Children's Seattle Hospital. He teaches mindfulness and breath work to kids and adults, but he mainly focused on kids because of his own story with his son, so that they don't have to use things like anesthesia and they can calm down and reset their fight or flight. His own son was 4 at the time and they needed to give him an epidural, but they couldn't give him anesthesia because he was all swollen and puffy from the leukemia issue he was having. And to give him the anesthesia, it might have killed him. And so, using breath work and mindfulness practices, he actually calmed his son down enough to give him an epidural without any pain. He didn't feel any of it. And so I'm working with him on that. And then I have another lady, Anna, who she's all about the body, the somatic release. And so by clearing things through movement, through yoga and other practices like that, integrating that with breath work, she's clearing things out of the body. And then I'm coming in and teaching people how to do journey work, connect with their guides, work with the elements, because each element brings a different teaching, a different way of letting things go. So if you're not very emotional, for example, or you need to work through your emotions, working with the water and a journey will actually help shake things up. If you're not grounded or you're too grounded, sometimes working with air or earth will help you. You know, and doing a burial ceremony and a journey is very powerful where you basically go into the earth and bury yourself and you allow your body and everything to just disintegrate and become nothing and go back to the earth. And then eventually when you're ready, you come back into your body, and then you continue your journey. There's a lot of power with journey work that we don't realize, and it's bringing this information out there to people and saying, "Look, modern medicine isn't working as good as it could. Some people need more than just basic talk therapy. People shouldn't, there's that therapy where people have to relive the events over and over until they change their feelings towards it. To me, that sounds like torture. It's like we can clear that. We can let that go. We can reset those triggers without necessarily having to relive it. Like our teacher says, feel the feelings when they happen, but don't get stuck in the emotions. We can't change the past, but we can change how we react to it. And so my goal really is to just, even if it's not working with me personally, as long as the information gets out there and more people start utilizing these quote unquote alternative approaches to things, which isn't alternative. We've been doing this thousands of years. The modern medicine is the alternative. Modern medicine just puts a band aid on things and sends you on your way, hoping that you'll work through it. Or if not, you'll just take this pill for the rest of your life and you'll figure it out if you don't kill yourself because you can't take that anymore. So it's getting people back to these old ways of doing things and realizing that there's something more out there, and that even if you believe in Christianity or Judaism or whatever God that you want to follow, shamanism doesn't take away from that. It adds to it. We know from our own training, Catholic priests have gone through and learned how to do journey work. Muslims have learned how to do journey work. Their religion shouldn't stop you from wanting to connect with your guides and your ancestors. That doesn't take away from your religion. It doesn't take away from the stories of, you going to heaven or working with a god or your angels. Like, if anything, shamanism will help expand that and bring you closer to your God, bring you closer to your angels or whatever you want, your deities, whoever it is you want to work with. To me, that's all multifaceted layers of what I call spirit. Like one example I say a lot is when I was in Egypt during that time and we met some locals and actually stayed at their house and went camping in the desert and everything with them. One of the guys there, he said, he's like, there's Judaism, there's Buddhist, there's Hinduism, there's Catholic, there's all these different religions out there, but they all take you to one God. So it doesn't matter which way you go, you're all going back to the same source, the same God. So I call it source and spirit, you call it God. It doesn't matter. Whatever way works for you to get there, that's fine. But just knowing that there's something more out there. And if you don't even want to believe in a God, that's fine too. If you want to strictly say, "Oh, I'm atheist, I don't believe in any of this," okay. But try doing a couple journeys first and just see what happens. You might not meet God, but you're going to meet some other guides. You're going to meet your power animal. You're going to see something that you can't explain. And if you want to look at it from the scientific level, which I know you're very good at, quantum physics says we're all made up of energy. They say that there's something else out there. There's other dimensions out there. There's multiverses. Our own science is now telling us the same thing that these indigenous people, not even just shamans, but cultures have been known for thousands of years. Even the Egyptians had their own version of all this. 200, was that 2,500 to 3,000 years ago? They knew this stuff, and we act like we know better because we're supposedly smarter than everybody else. That happened thousands of years ago for whatever reason. To me, that's a racist concept because they knew a lot more than we do now, and we're just now catching back up with them when it comes to this stuff.
Nice, Jeremy. I see really the enriching beauty of reframing our stories through shamanic practices. That's really resonates with me, Welly, and I can see how the mind would rather be involved in reframing one's own state by a beautiful spiritual story and meeting someone bigger, larger than oneself, and this awakens something within ourselves. You know, this probably boosts us up with extra energy to seek into more healing, to be more balanced, continuous in keeping our state. Thank you for sharing
And I
your
would
views. You know, and I much agree from a personal view that these practices, spiritual practices, shamanic practices, are obviously having a better effect on many individuals than the psychology or psychiatry, whatever people they try to help themselves just to heal their traumas.
what I mean, and
Uh,
there's a place where you can mix both. So I mean, I one of my first teachers, and I actually had him on as a guest too, was Paul Francis. He's a psychotherapist. He was a practicing psychotherapist for, I think he said, like 30 years. And during that time, he was also learning about shamanism and shamanic journey work and practices and stuff. And so there is a place for both of them to be combined. You know, there's a way of doing the parts work with shamanism. There's a way of, we also use soul loss and soul parts and soul fragments, but there's also the parts work where sometimes parts of us break off and hide within ourselves. So they're not gone. So there's no retrieving that needs to be done from a soul perspective, but it's integrating those old parts that have went into hiding. We need to bring those back too. And that's from a psychotherapist point of view, but you can do that with journey work. And so there is a place for both. And I don't think one is better than the other per se, but combining those Western practices with the ancient traditions, that goes to that prophecy of the eagle and the condor. It's the eagle is modern technology, Western way of thinking. The condor is the old indigenous practices. And the belief in the prophecy is one day they're going to merge and fly wing to wing together. And so there's no reason we can't do both. There's nothing wrong with taking medication if you need it at the moment, but there's ways afterwards where you can get off those medications and you don't need to be dependent on them. And that's where I really have a problem is 90% of the drugs people take they're a lifetime thing. There's no cure after that. It's the cure is the medicine to help put the band-aid on. But there's no further exploration to ever get you off of those medications. And when you do try to get off those medications, it's harder and you can have worse side effects from it, like SSRIs. I work with clients a lot where we're trying to get them off those SSRIs by getting to the root of the reason why they got on the SSRIs. And then we're using microdosing with mushrooms and other plants to help their bodies get help wean off the SSRIs. And at the same time, they're working with their doctor with a plan to wean off. But using the microdosing helps mitigate the side effects. Doing the shamanic clearing also helps get to the core root of why they were on it in the first place. So it's combining the two. They needed the SSRIs, they didn't have any other options. Now they want to get off. Let's go through the right steps. And I mean, you know how it is. People usually don't come to us until they've tried everything else. So it's by the
well,
time they come to us, they've already done everything else and they don't know what else to do. And now they're like, well, screw it. I guess I should try this shaman thing that people have mentioned before. Like,
uh, sure, yeah. Yeah, and as we as shamans, we practice prevention. So this about reshedding our stuff, cyclically, annually, whatever we now do, it's important to remind ourselves. And this binds me a bit more to the fact that you said, well, we can cure our states, or so to say, we were up in the PTSD area. We can cure our PTSD to a certain degree, to a big degree, but it never actually leaves. One is aware that it's dormant and it could appear if we are not doing our inner work regularly. This is what we call in shamanism shedding, reshedding, yearly, annually, whatever we do, preventing so this could happen, flame up again. Thank you for sharing, Jeremy. And I agree with you that science and this ancient wisdom that we are sharing the medicine of care or nation is a very good thing to combine as well, and it gives a bigger edge as well to one practitioner to be able to help people from different angles and perspectives. Thank you. My very last question, briefly, do you have any messages or medicine that you feel called to share with others, especially those struggling with trauma?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is you're not alone. There's others out there ready to help you. They might not understand fully what you're going through, and that's something that I've come to learn too. It's me as the veteran going through my own trauma, my own PTSD. I made it about me, not actually understanding the impact and the trauma that I was causing to my own family. And so it's not just about you, and I don't wanna make that sound mean, but it's you need to work on yourself, yes, but know that when you work on yourself, you're also going to be helping those around you. And those around you who are trying to understand, who are trying to help, yet they haven't been through what you've been through, but don't shut them out to the point where they'll no longer want to help you. You know, you can even say, "Look, I don't wanna talk about it. I don't wanna get into full details. I know there's something there that I need to work on. I don't know where to start." Maybe it's something as, "I appreciate the fact that you're trying." That's gonna go a long way with your family. You know, they're gonna understand, "Okay, he you guys aren't ready to talk about it yet. Something really happened bad." Maybe they know part of the story, maybe they don't. But just knowing that you appreciate their offer to help, I think goes a long way, and it's very important that we as those with PTSD or trauma realize that it's what we are going through is also affecting those around us. And that's why they want to help because they care. When we start pushing people away because they'll never understand, they're not going to understand. They won't. Like that's just what it is. No one's going to understand what it was like to be in a firefight if you weren't there. No one's going to understand what it's like to be a paramedic and go on an accident scene of a 30 car pileup or a firefighter at a house where you just couldn't get everybody out. Nobody's going to understand that because they weren't there. Even myself, I don't understand what it would be like to be at a house with a fire and people didn't make it all the way and you had to deal with the aftermath. I wouldn't understand it. But just know that these people who care for you are there for you and they do want to help whatever way they can. And if it's just you saying, "Look, I appreciate that you're here. I just need you to be here and just to let me try to work through it. And then when I'm ready, I'll reach out." Maybe that's enough. Some people still try to push and still try to help more. You just got to understand that's who they are. As far as getting healing, whatever you got to try different things. That's really what it comes down to. Like I said, for myself, it started with boxing and working out and getting that aggression out more. And for me, that was a safe way to release without hurting anybody. But then that still wasn't enough because there's still the mind and the spirit level that I needed to address. And so for me, that happened over a course of 5, 6 years. It was a long journey because I didn't realize what was necessary at the time. And when it comes to the spirit side of things, if shamanism is in your bag, that's fine. You don't need to become a shaman in order to do shamanic work. You don't need to be a shaman, quote unquote, to learn how to journey. I honestly believe that to journey is a gift that we all can do. You might need a quick guidance real quick and a quick teaching on how to do it, but you can do this on your own. You can meet your guides on your own. You can do these things, and it's something that we can all do. You don't have to go through the extensive training that, myself and Nicola went through in order to do basic work to connect with your guides, to connect with your ancestors, to learn how to journey and get healing. You can do this all on your own. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize. You don't have to be a quote unquote shaman to do this work. You don't. And so look at that. And try different things. Maybe shamanism isn't your thing. That was one of the whole reasons for this podcast was to give people different examples of what they can try. So I just had a guy on the other week with human design. That kind of teaches you a little bit about yourself, things that you can do with your life, maybe different paths you should take, different personalities that you probably have and didn't realize it, different ways of thinking and being. That can be very helpful. It was for him with his PTSD. Things like plant ceremonies are very good, but make sure you're with the right facilitator in the right spot. Don't just do it at some guy's house or at a concert. You want to make sure you're doing it correctly with the right facilitator. Astrology can be helpful. Reiki can be helpful. It doesn't necessarily need to be shamanism. For me, that was the path that worked best. That's the one that helped me connect. But for others, you might find it something different. So I would just say try different things. If anything, work with a practitioner of these different areas just to try it once and see what you think. Book a session, look online, find a shaman near you or a Reiki practitioner near you. This work can be done online as well. So even if I'm not resonating with you, maybe Nikola is. You can reach out to him, do a session with him, see what you think of it. And if it resonates with you, continue and try learning how to do certain things yourself. That's really what it comes down to is don't get stuck where you feel so hopeless that you're not willing to try because you're going to try things that don't work, but that's okay. You haven't failed. One thing we tell the kids and it's fail just means first attempt in learning. You're just trying something new. There is no I don't consider anything a failure because you're learning from it. There's so many different things I've tried that just didn't stick with me, like astrology. I find it interesting as hell. I just don't have the patience and I probably do. I just don't want to. I'll just say that. I just don't resonate with it enough for me to sit down with it and want to learn it. I could. I find it interesting, and those who do it very well, hats off to you. I find it amazing. I just don't want to. So for me, shamanism was the thing that clicked with me and made me want to continue. So find what works for you. Do your best to connect however you work with you, even if it's just setting up a mini altar. A simple exercise could just be get a candle, a tea candle, whatever, just set it up somewhere in your house and light it and just say, could be something as simple as my, to my ancestors, thank you for being there enough to create me. I have gratitude for all that you have done. If there's any support or guidance you can give me, I am open to it. And just see what happens from that and allow them to come to you and help you and guide you in the right way. Because all of a sudden, you might find that suddenly what happened with me was I was just getting ads after ads on Facebook and other places of shamanic teachings and shamanic healers and Udemy sales for shamanic classes and all sorts of things. And I was never looking for it. And then suddenly Amazon was showing me recommended book titles and shamanism, all these random things that I was not Googling, I wasn't looking for. They just started popping up to the point where I'm like, what is this? Maybe I need to look at it. I never sought out shamanism. It came to me. I never would have even 10, 15 years ago, and I thought you were crazy. Like,
Oh, hey,
it's
thank you for sharing, you
being
know.
open to it and just being open to the healing that's gonna come, and you're probably already getting messages now, you're just not realizing it yet.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that story. And it resonates with me very well, Jeremy, because my journey was similar, is similar. I'm still in this process of exploration, discovery, which I think ultimately is a beautiful state for any human being to remember that we are also here to explore, discover what's without, but mostly out of our own responsibility to our own healing journey and how we affect the whole, and that outwardly we're ultimately responsible for our own healing, and we should be open or receptive to actually discovering and exploring these different areas of healing practices. However, now our individual state wants to perceive it or accept this process. Thank you, Jeremy, for sharing such a beautiful story and lots of beautiful mystical experiences. I wish you very great luck in your future, your business, and my best to your family and to your loved ones.
You too, man. And real quick, just if you want to let people know where to find you, I'll put some stuff in the show notes as well. But in case anyone wants to work with you, we're gonna have actually Nicola's gonna come back on probably in a couple of weeks with his partner Charlene, and they're gonna actually talk about a school that he's developing that's gonna come out probably what June, I think you said. So more to come on that. But if you want to just let people know where to find it so they can follow you and wait for the information.
Okay. Mm. Well, Jeremy, I just his 10 module, 10-week course, which is
Yeah. Can
largely
you can you
all of the
repeat that real quick?
content is
Because you
ready.
cut out. You somehow went mute and no
Oh,
video. So if you want to just repeat that real quick.
well, listen, we can take it another time. You just cut it there where we
Oh,
said, because my telephone started ringing as well at the same moment here and everything.
yeah.
So, but we can talk about that next time then.
Okay. We'll just I'll cut this in, but why don't you just go ahead and let people know where they can find you? I know you have a Facebook group. If they want to reach out to you by email, if you want to give that out or anything.
Okay. Well, let me say, if anybody is interested to look into deeper insights on shamanism and mixture with science, psychology, quantum realms, well, visit the Facebook group, The Beauty Way. You can even visit a website called munaikeyarts.com. Contact us, reach out to us. We are also preparing a 10-week long course. Within a few months, it will be launched. You're very much more than welcome. Reach out to us. We can help you, guide you. We can direct you to these different specialty realms, which you then will be able to help yourself with.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'll
Thank
put all that in the show notes as well for people, but just so they can reach out to you if they want to.
No problem.
Cool. So yeah, I appreciate you doing this, man. This is fun. I think this was way more engaging than me just speaking into a mic for an hour. So thank you for that.
Super nice. My pleasure as well, man. My pleasure. You stay the best, and all my best to your people. Still always.
You too. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Shaman Stories podcast. If you have any interest in the services that I provide or the services of my guest, please click the link in the show notes below. Thank you. And until next time, have a good journey.